Trevor Noah once said America is 50 countries masquerading as one. Do you think this is true or false? If so, why? Anytime I read questions that end in "and why" like this, I think that some 9th grader got egged an essay and wants Reddit to write it for them. Can you answer that in 2 pages? This sounds like a starter for a history essay. It's a misconception that all 50 states are supposed to be uniform. It's from a perspective of folks that prefer a larger national government, but each state is supposed to be free to do its own thing. It's almost like we have an amendment saying this exact thing. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. That's the point of a federal country, such as Austria, Belgium, Ethiopia, Germany, Malaysia, Mexico, Nigeria, Pakistan, Switzerland, or the United Arab Emirates. Edit. Alright, got it. Defend the US equals GET, a bunch of upvotes. You don't even need to look at federal countries. Even hugely centralized countries can have huge regional differences. I come from Brittany, Western France. Our culture is vastly different from the rest of France. We are Celts. We have our own language, food, and traditions. Southern France and Northern France are also extremely different culturally. Alsace, Pays Basque and Corsica, just like my own region, have their own specific languages and culture. And I haven't even talked about overseas territories. This is true of most countries. I live in Germany, but Germany isn't just one country. There is a constitution, the basic law Grundgesetz, and federal laws passed by Congress. Then there are the state laws passed by the state governments. Then there are local regulations defined by the counties, cities, or town governments. Bavaria, for example, is a free state. The Bavarian leaders never signed the German basic law, but stated that they would accept it if 2/3 of the rest of the German states signed it. All other German states did sign it, so the law applies to Bavaria as well. But Bavaria still sees itself as somewhat more independent than other German states. Bavaria, for example, has a political party that is only active in that state, the CSU, that is associated with the CDU, that is active in all other German states. In the current German government, the CSU has several minister positions, even though it only represents one of 16 states in the country. Federal laws are the same across the country, but things like education and schools are in the responsibility of the state, so there are differences. The states try to align them as much as possible, but there are differences, because each state allocates different budgets for education. Sounds like Bavaria is German Texas. Edit. Thanks for the gold. The whole idea is that there are 50 independent political entities under one flag, so masquerading isn't the best description, but he's not totally off base. He kind of is. I mean, there are large regional differences, sure, but it's not like German vs Italian level differences. You could probably make an argument that it's 3 to 4 countries trying to act unified, but it's kind of hard, to try to say New Mexico and Arizona are supposedly so far apart from one another that it's basically like going to another country. Sure, the demographics and government change, but it's not that dramatic. Just taking the phrase United States of America literally would suggest exactly that. The word state means country/nation/territory organized politically under a government. America is the landmass, i.e., North America/South America. So yeah, there are 50 states that are united, as if they are a single one ruled under another big government, and they all happen to be in America. France is a state, and Poland is a state, and Canada is a state. They just aren't among the united ones of America. It was once common to say the United States are, rather than the United States is. I'd recast Trevor's comment this way: 50 sovereign identities coexisting as one republic. More accurate. Don't know about USA, but this is spot on for India. Languages, cuisine, culture varies wildly throughout the country as you travel from one state to another. The closest analogy to India is probably Europe with respect to diversity in culture. Didn't realize it was applicable to US. They say that if a North Indian and South Indian talk to each other, the only language they'll both speak is English. Not really. I suppose you can look at it a few ways, legally or culturally. Legally, sure, there's the aspect of states having some amount of control over their own laws, but this tends to only cover specifics and relatively minor stuff in the grand scheme of things, with the country's law taking precedence in most cases. Culturally, there is a fair difference between states, but I still see the overall US cultural identity as stronger than the variations between different states. There's a far greater difference in cultures between, say, countries in Europe than states in the US. And even within a fairly small country like the UK, I'd say there's just as much of a range in cultures across the country as there is across the US. You guys have the benefit that you almost all speak the same language, English, while over here every country has its own language, sometimes even different religion. The 50 states are hardly autonomous with so much federal law on the books. So Trevor is overstating the case for the purpose of humor. In context, it was sincere. He was talking about his preconceived beliefs and understandings of American culture, originally thinking that it was more homogeneous than it actually is. To me they pretty much seem like provinces that basically every country has, not different countries. Yeah, Americans seem to laughably exaggerate how different all the states are, and are laughably ignorant of how every country has regional differences of culture, accent, cuisine, politics. Besides relatively recent immigrants and a few indigenous areas, literally everyone in America speaks one language. That alone makes us more homogeneous than several countries which don't even have a single language that everyone speaks. Belgium, India, South Africa, Turkey, Switzerland. Trevor Noah is an enigma to me. His jokes never land solidly, more like that little Olympic gymnast that broke her ankle and stood there blinking back tears. His observations remind me of Clarence Thomas' dissenting opinions, not in content, but in their esoteric qualities relative to majority opinions. I've long suspected Stewart chose Noah to ensure that Stewart remains the GOAT Daily Show host. So go ahead and downvote me, hurt. If Stewart wanted to remain the be-all end-all host he didn't have to retire. Trevor Noah is a bad replacement. He's not quick on his feet or consistent about his criticisms across the political spectrum. Jon Stewart could skewer Obama every bit as well as he could Bush, and he did. I don't see that consistent standard of expectations from Noah. I think that exact statement is false. I like the NPR article he got the idea from. But according to author and journalist Colin Woodard, the country is neither united nor made up of 50 states. Woodward has studied American voting patterns, demographics, and public opinion polls going back to the days of the first settlers, and says that his research shows America is really made up of 11 different nations. NPR. The 11 nations understanding certainly has its pros and cons, and Woodard even mentions that various communities within these nations might constitute nations unto themselves, the Black Belt, Mormon country, etc. So the number of nations is somewhat fluid. I don't think it can be denied though that there are strong regional differences within America, and that these divisions are very deep and old. I can see the point of a statement like that. There is a big difference, and a lot of common ground between, say, California, Rhode Island, and North Dakota. Then again, if you ever ask me, I always answer I'm a Texan. I pledge allegiance to the flag of Texas, and those other 49 lesser states. Not 50, no, but maybe 10 or so. Yeah, I think culturally a lot of regions could probably hold together as one country. The South, the Midwest, the Southwest, etc. California and New England would probably stand to be several smaller countries. The states aren't like countries. Some of them are like Texas and California and a few others, but most are more like provinces that every other country has. The states aren't separate enough from US Congress to be country-like. Yay, it's supposed to be. Miami is different than Seattle. Imagine my shock. Lol, wait until you visit India. Trevor Noah hasn't the slightest idea what America is, or how Americans feel. He's a bit clueless really. Main reason why I just can't bring myself to listen to him without cringing. Not really. Legally, they are mostly under that same law with just small trivial differences. They just happen to be organized by separate governments. The US is not at all unique in this regard. Germany, for example, is also a republic that acts largely in this way. If a state were to actually try to do something radically different than the rest of the country, the federal government would step in and somehow control it to prevent chaos. Culturally, the US is absurdly homogeneous for the size of its population and its size. There is no other large country I can think of with fewer cultural differences per mile. Just look at China, India, Germany, UK, etc. and how much more diverse they are in terms of regional cuisine, dialects/accents, etc. And those countries are sometimes smaller than a single US state. He isn't even American, so why the duck would I care what he thinks of us? Spoken like a true American. It's false. You can easily drive from one state to another and do business. There is no restrictions between the 50 states for trade, travel, or commerce. Plus Trevor Noah isn't American, and trusting anything he says about America is a fool's trap. Same for crusty teeth John Oliver. My travel plans to Florida were cancelled. They closed their borders to anyone that doesn't have a FL plate. Only 50? I live in New York City. There are people here who live in Manhattan who have never been to Staten Island, and people who live in Staten Island who have never been to a different part of Staten Island. But do those two places function differently from one another legally? Or do they both follow New York state law? Plenty of people around the world never leave their hometown. That doesn't mean the town down the road is a different country. Nope. Not true in the least. Why? Because screw Trevor Noah. He hates America. This is why he thinks the way he does. Nuff said. Didn't he also support the looting and destruction of property? From an outside perspective, hell no. Milwaukee didn't bomb the Middle East. It's not a secret. That's how we were designed. E pluribus unum. Trevor is a clown. Who cares? That description is exactly people don't like his political commentary. Like dude, that's the point of the country. It's in the name United States of America. I honestly think it's a feature. If it weren't for the federalist methods we would not be able to legally smoke weed anywhere. Politics should happen at the state level more than the federal level. Ted Cruz shouldn't make policy that affects Californians just like Nancy Pelosi shouldn't make policy that affects Texans. This is sort of how most places are. Even within states. I mean the difference between Baltimore, Maryland and Cecil County. Maryland is huge. And if you go to France the difference between Aix and Grenoble is pretty huge. Any differences between the states are pretty minor in comparison to leaving the USA to somewhere else. There are differences, but all 50 states are distinctly American, even a place like Hawaii. Why do you guys even listen to Trevor Noah? He's not even American, and he just takes the mickey out of everything with his inflammatory humor. He's not the one I think anyone should be quoting when making political arguments. He's a TV comedian who ignores stats and figures and just goes along what will get the people talking the most. False. We are not 50 countries masquerading as one, Mr. Noah. We are 50 countries united as one. Trevor Noah is an idiot who regurgitates what his writers have seen on the internet. People listen to Trevor Noah? Interesting. Trevor Noah is an unfunny duck that ruined the Daily Show. Coming out of his mouth makes it an immediate lie. It also makes the concept laughable. The guy is a nutter joke and can see himself off ETH at his earliest convenience. The left coast, the far west, the Midlands, El Norte, Greater Appalachia, Deep South, New France, Tidewater, New Netherland, Yankeedom, First Nation American Nations, A History of the 11 Rival Regional Cultures of North America by Colin Woodward. Too many people watch that show as their news source. Also Trevor Noah isn't funny. Him and John Oliver. Pure network propaganda. If people complain about those who watch Hannity for news, the same arguments apply for late night comedians. Imagine your pinnacle of deep critical thought being a quote by Trevor ducking Noah. The answer to your question is literally in the name of the country, United States of America. And the European Union is 27 countries masquerading as one, by that logic. Of course each state is unique. Who would expect otherwise? Would he rather see a homogeneous society? There were these guys who tried that. Didn't end well. The European Union is 27 countries with independent governments, armies and other items. There is just a shared interest in free trade and travel between countries. Even for currency, the individual country when joining could choose to have the euro or not. Think of it like the Greek city/states of old. Essentially each was independent, but were part of a united Greek world. Then the Romans came along and had a republic. The US is a hybrid model. States are self-governed and only answer to the federal government in federal matters. The federal government is also made up of representatives from those states who vie for federal mandates that are good for their self-governed state. The Fed also has its own police force, FBI, and other agencies that are mirrored in state, county, and city levels. The FBI is supposed to only intervene in multi-state crimes unless called upon. Criminals who cross state lines often become federally hunted criminals because now they are multi-jurisdictional and fall under the umbrella of federal control. Also, each state teaches its own history in schools that are managed by the state rather than the federal. In Georgia you take Georgia history and US history, while in New York you would have a New York-centered history book. Americans of the United States have several loyalties in their social contract. You have your local community, your town/city, your county, your state, and the nation as a whole. Each requires different levels of commitment and taxation, and in response each provides a different level of governance and systems. In the event of a natural or national disaster, each state and their lower levels of governance are set up to work as if the Fed didn't exist to an extent. Meaning should Washington D.C. be removed from the equation, the states could still function for a time, if not indefinitely, until a solution is found. National Guard units are drawn from states and are technically soldiers of that state and are tasked with state-mandated defense and aid. They are federal military and state militia at the same time. But in the last 40 years, federal mandates have made state control of these guard units fall more and more under federal control. Until 1986 a governor or a state could withhold mobilizing troops for a war if they felt it was not in their interest. And in 2006 the federal passed laws making it legal for the president to directly mobilize guard units within their states with permission of the governor. So dissolution of state autonomy and power is real, but at varying degrees. Yes, because you see Delaware calls it pop, while here in Oregon we call it soda. They eat Shake Shack, while we eat a Wendy's. They cook their BBQ with apple cider vinegar, while we just use BBQ sauce. Far smarter people than Trevor Noah have said that first. Kinda how it's supposed to be, with the federal government as a framework to make it cohesive. Granted, with the past 150 years or so of two warring factions wanting complete domination for one or the other, it's all being confused and nobody, local, state, or federal, is being represented. Yeah, Trevor, that's kind of the point. So two states can't decide everything for everyone. All these people talking about how the US should be multiple countries. We had this conversation. It was called the US Civil War. All I know is, we, Michigan, once went to war with Ohio. Fortunately we lost, or else we don't Lido. Personally I'm willing to go to war with them again, provided win or lose, they have to take Detroit. False. As for while one has to do, is have a very basic understanding of the US Constitution. I feel like Trevor Noah fans also don't have a basic understanding of the Constitution, and will just take his word for it. Why would anyone care what this Trevor Noah says? Trevor Noah should just shut his trap. He only spews cheese when he talks. Imageographer. False. I take issue with the masquerading part. If you took 1,000 random small cities across America, they'd be indistinguishable and pretty uniformly boring to look at. They'd look pretty much all the same, sadly. Some states like Texas, Alaska, Hawaii, or California have unique identities that deep separate them apart from the rest. But that's it. Americans for the most part are the same. The United States is like Christianity, the same base religion, but a bunch of different sects. That's how it's supposed to be. Not masquerading. America is 50 states who are unified under one banner, but control their own cheese. Course it's not doing that right now. Course for the past 50 years the Fed has gotten more and more power and isn't allowing such things. But alas. I once heard we are no longer a melting pot, but a salad bowl. A melting pot infers we are melting cultures together. A salad bowl is all the cultures together but not combining. As long as we are not compost. There are times when we're 50 states and there are times when we're one country and have national needs. And the way I know this is that Florida didn't fight Germany in World War II or establish civil rights. Josiah Bartlett, the most popular fictional president ever. I like the 7 or 9 nations theory because it's tied to the cultural landscape of the country. Saying each state is its own country is a little simplistic in terms of the way things are run and processed socially. Trevor Noah is masquerading as a comedian. Sounds like something an authoritarian would say, but okay. Trevor Noah yup. I would bet most American states are more similar to each other culturally than any other country on earth. So no, I disagree. US seems more like one country split into 50 states, which it is. This is a consequence of letting a foreign comedian who never even went to college dominate American late night talk shows. Of course it's false. Here's a major issue by not having uniform laws throughout the country. If a gay parent goes out of state with their child to a state where gay marriage isn't legal and something incapacitates that parent, the other parent could very likely have a very hard time reuniting with that child. This was just an example of how different laws in different states can have negative consequences on citizens of the same country. Division tactics from a comedian. Trevor Noah is a complete idiot and an actual example of a successful comedian / public voice that came to this country and didn't understand it. He has always had nothing of worth to add to any conversation we have in this country, save for his experience with apartheid. A hack's hack. Speaking as a Midwestern American, it's more like the districts from Hunger Games. I agree with the sentiment. However, I believe it can be better narrowed down to regions versus states. That is, the Northeast, the South, the Southwest, the Pacific Northwest, Midwest, etc. Trevor Noah is a stupid POS. I can see why an American might agree with this statement, but for me, as a non-American, I really do not agree. America, or rather the United States of, could have been _50 countries and have been much like Europe in a sense, but it isn't. It is one country. While there is definitely local culture that is different between state to state, there is still a very strong cohesion under the American flag. Americans are extremely nationalistic, to levels that are ducking absurd to people outside USA. You literally see more American flags before exiting the airport after landing than you would see Swedish flag after spending a full year here. USA is very much _one country. It's so insanely horny for its own flag and its symbolism that even implying it's 50 countries masquerading as one just make you sound silly tbh. Are there differences between the states? Yeah, but that holds true for other countries too when comparing different parts of the same country. I honestly don't give a duck what Trevor Noah thinks or says. Ducking clown. Trevor Noah makes some funny jokes, but you shouldn't take his comments too seriously. They're mostly recycled, anyway. It's a common misconception to believe that a nation, any nation, is unified just because it's a nation. Trevor should know Africa is a tapestry of different cultures and languages. Being the same country changes nothing about internal cultural identities, let alone the fact that much of our current geopolitical maps isn't 100 years old. Nations are just bureaucratic constructs, agreements for the functioning of people grouped together, sometimes unified by language and common cultural artifacts, but more often divided by those same artifacts. Say how the south of England or Brazil or India is wildly different from the north or the center. Even large cities have wildly different populations who do not agree with each other on many levels, even if they have to obey the same laws of the country / state / county. I really hope that was a typo or a forgotten word, but you know Africa isn't a country, right? I just came to see if anyone genuinely thinks he is funny. Deleted. The UK has one of its constituent countries holding a lot of power over the other three, nothing like the federal system of the US. The English-British government controls almost everything and grants a few local powers to the devolved parliaments in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. There is no devolved government for England. Kid, Reddit isn't going to write your damn essay. False because duh. I certainly see his point. The United States is so big and diverse that it's kind of hard for me to consider it one continuous country in a sense. Values, political views and culture vary so wildly that it's hard to pinpoint anything as truly being American in nature. That said, 50 countries is probably too far. If anything, I'd say it's mostly divided up by regions, and said regions could be considered country like New England, the Pacific Northwest, the Midwest and the Southeast for example are all extremely different places without a ton in common. I do also believe the needs and desires of different states and regions are too varied to be adequately served by the federal government these days. This got kind of off topic, but essentially I see where he's coming from. I think Trevor Noah is one of the most unfunny people on TV. False. The differences do not fall across state lines. America is 9 countries: New England, New York City, a city-state, the Midwest, Mormon, Utah, the South, Florida, Texas, the Pacific Northwest, California. According to the book American Nations, there are 12 distinct cultural nations that make up the country. It's pretty well documented. I strongly recommend it to anyone interested. It is because that was the whole point. All I know is that NJ is the best one. Oh my, you watched until the end? That's fucking awesome, dude. Thanks for watching.